Hello. So welcome to our first online class. I hope everyone's doing well. Obviously it's been a big adjustment, I'm sure, for all of you. My plan going forward is to first start by posting YouTube videos that'll basically go through some of our class activities, that'll introduce new concepts. And then from there I'm gonna look to adjust things. Maybe I can do a live stream. Or maybe I'll use another platform to allow a bit more interaction so you guys can ask me questions. Since our classes are going to be all online from now on, I really encourage you guys to send me messages on D2L and on email. I'll be monitoring those constantly, so I'll try to keep up and get back to you guys as quickly as possible. So for today's class, what I want to do is go over the course project. And we're going to start with that, and then the other thing I'll do is just one of the exercises from the labs. I'll walk through that with you guys. So let's talk a little bit about the project. The project is fairly challenging. When I was setting it up and everything, I was kind of debating whether I should go with such a difficult one or try to have something a little bit easier. But in the end, I felt like a good challenge is kind of worth the effort. So looking at the project plans, I went through and evaluated those, and I felt like they weren't really as well done as I was hoping. They didn't have as much detail as you would need to really get started. So just to review, the whole idea of the project plan is so you plan out all of your work. You plan out all of your variables, your functions, and what your main algorithm and strategy is going to be. Because if you don't have those things, right, and I'm given a problem, and I just sit down and start coding it right away, the end result is not going to be very good. I'm probably going to make a bunch of mistakes and missteps along the way, and the solution I come to usually won't be the optimum one. The code will not be as clean and as easy to understand as possible. So by planning out exactly what you're going to do, you can have a much clearer idea, and you usually get a much better result. So I'm going to show you guys what I would do for my project plan. Okay, if I was planning this out and going to be creating the calculator myself. Now there are several ways you can approach the problem of creating your calculator. And I encourage you to look online or talk to some other more experienced second year, third year students, and maybe they can give you some tips that they use. All right. Okay, so the algorithm that I'm going to show you today is a very simple one, and let's start with the variables you need to do this algorithm. So first, I'm going to need two arrays that are going to contain strings. So I'll write these down on the board. The first one, I'm going to call it formula elements. Okay? And formula elements is going to basically contain whatever we're punching into our calculator as we go. Okay? Except that we're going to make some adjustments to our calculations as we punch them in. And the adjustment we're going to make is anytime someone does a multiplication or division and they enter that into the calculator, we're going to modify this array as we go so it doesn't contain any multiplication or division. It'll only contain addition or subtraction, okay? And you'll see in a minute, down the road, why that's going to work. Now the other array I'm going to use is called original formula elements. So I'm going to write that down here. Okay, and this once again is an array of string as well. And then the last variable that I need, which is a global variable in this case, I'm going to call this current number. Okay, and this will be a string as well. Okay, and you might think, well, Eric, why wouldn't you have that as a number, a variable in JavaScript? Well, basically, we're going to be adding different button presses together. So the person might press a 5, then they might press a 4, and the number we need is 54. So the easiest way to do that is concatenate two strings together. All right, so let me try to describe the algorithm that I'm going to use. So original formula elements, this is going to contain everything that the person enters into the calculator as they go. So if the person types in, for example, let's say they type in 5 plus 6 times 3 minus 2, okay? In that case, original formula elements at index 0 would be a 5, at index 1 would be a plus, at index 2, 6, okay? So on and so on and so on. And the reason we need this original formula elements is because as we're typing into our calculator, we have to be able to display what the user has typed, okay? Now, if we were to not use our formula elements array, and we're only going to use the original formula elements, then this problem becomes fairly challenging. And the reason is because we have to solve multiplication and division before we can do addition and subtraction. So essentially what the formula elements array is going to do is as we're entering the numbers in, instead of storing everything exactly as the person types it, if they happen to do a multiplication or a division operation, we are going to solve that and store the simplified formula which only has addition and subtraction in formula elements, okay? So essentially, at this point, the formula elements array would look like this. It would be 5, okay, plus 18 minus 2, okay? So this is the whole trick, and this is the only difficult part here. If we're able to achieve this, then all we have to do is create a function that will accept our formula elements array, and all that function has to do is loop through the elements and basically calculate the final result. And because it's addition and subtraction, it doesn't have to worry about order of operations, all right? It can just go 5 plus 18 is 23, minus 2 is 21. It can return that value, okay? Now, I still haven't exactly explained how we will handle doing the multiplication and division as the person's typing this stuff in, okay? But I don't think that that's that difficult. Let's try to do that example now, though, okay? So we have this example, 5 plus 6 times 3 minus 2, all right? So basically, let's just start with, we have our calculator, okay? And the person first hits 5, okay? At this point, when they hit 5, the current number variable, this stores whatever number the person is currently in the process of entering. So if they hit 5, current number, we're going to assign 5 to that variable. And if they hit 4 and 3, then this current number is going to store whatever they're entering, okay? And we're going to keep storing the numbers there. Now in this case, they're only going to hit 5. And then when they hit the plus symbol, we're going to do basically the first step in our algorithm. So when they hit plus, what we're going to do is we're going to look to see what was the previous operator in our array. Now in this case, we have a 5 and a plus. We don't have any other operators. So if we look back, we run out the end of our array. So we know in this case there's no other operators. So when they hit the plus, okay, we can go ahead and we can enter into our array 5 and then the operator plus, okay? Now, because they've hit the plus operator, we're now going to grab a different number. So the current number value, I'm going to reset that, and now the user can start hitting number buttons. In this case, they hit a 6, so current number is equal to 6, okay? And then at this point, they hit the multiplication symbol, okay? Now because they hit an operator, I'm going to look and see what was the last operator that the person entered. In this case, I'm going to look all the way back, and I see that it's a plus that they entered. In this case, I don't care, right? If it's a plus or a subtraction, I can just leave it as is. I don't need to worry about order of operations, because the final result, I want to have plus and minus operations in my array. So in this case, I don't worry about it, okay? And I add my 6 to my array, and I add my multiplication symbol to my array, all right? I reset my current number variable, okay? And now I let the user, they can now start typing whatever buttons they want. They hit 3 in this case. Great. So current number becomes 3, and now they hit the minus operator. So now once again we check. We go back and we say, well, what was the previous operator they hit? Okay, it's a multiplication symbol. So in this case, this is our special situation where we don't want to leave a multiplication operation in our array. All right? We want to solve multiplication and division as we go. So because of this, what we do is we look at the two values, the one that they just entered, which is 3, and we look at the value before in our array, which is 6. And we actually do the multiplication. And of course, the result is 18. And then what we do is we remove these elements from the array. Okay? And we basically add 18, which is our value. And then we have a minus symbol, which was the operator that the user last hit. Now we let the user enter whatever values they want. We reset our current number once again. And this time they hit 2. So we enter in 2 here, and then that gets added to our array. All right? Now at this point, the user, let's say they enter the equal sign. Okay, they hit equals. Well, what we do is we take our formula elements and we pass this directly to a function that goes through and adds and subtracts the values and then returns our result, okay? Which ends up being 21. So that's essentially the steps that's one way to solve it. Now keep in mind, we always have our original formula elements. So this would contain the result with the multiplication or division operations inside it. That way, when we display it on the calculator display area, okay, they don't see the work in progress, the calculations we've done. They see all of the values that have been typed in, and that's an important step. Now, remember, this is just one way to solve it. We talked a little bit in class. There's some different ways you can do it. You might come up with a different way, and that's great. I don't know that this is the best way to do it. It's just one way that came to mind when I was thinking about the problem. Okay. So let's switch now to look at some code, and I'll go through basically I can enter in these variables into my project, and then after that we can talk about some of the functions that we'll need for doing the project. Okay, so let's get started here. So I've got my D2L shell set up, and I'm going to go ahead and download the project files. Okay, so let's get brackets to open this up. Okay, so with this example here, I'm just going to put in my script tags basically just in the same document. I'm not going to use an external file, but obviously if I was going to go and submit this, we know that external files are much better. All right, so from what we talked about on the whiteboard, right, I've got my global variables that I'm going to now add to my, my script. So basically, I'm going to declare var formula elements. Okay, and this is going to be an array. So I've declared that. I spelled it wrong though. Formula. Oh no, I just need to camel case it. Okay, formula elements, and I'm going to go var original we might need to make, I'm going to try to make the text a little bit bigger here. Okay, hopefully that's a little bit better. Okay. So original formula elements. Once again, this is also an array which is going to contain strings. And then the last variable I want is current number. And I'm going to set this equal to the empty string to begin. Okay. All right. So next up, let's look at some of the input handling we have to do on the project. So here's our HTML right here. And basically what I can see is that we have a bunch of text elements that are using a span HTML tag. So essentially what we need to do is we need to get all of these elements, all of these spans, and we need to attach an on-click event handler. So how can we do that? Well, essentially what we want to do is we want to get the element here, this div, which has a class of keys, and then we want to get an array which contains all the children. And we can loop through all those children elements, and then we can attach our on-click event handler to that. All right. So a few people have asked me already, is it okay, Eric, if I add IDs to the HTML, right? To modify the HTML just a little bit. And my response is that basically, if you're gonna do it in a couple places, that's fine. So right here, this is a good example. I can go ID equals keys, okay? And now it makes it a lot easier to select this. Now, if I weren't to do that, I would have to basically get the this first div here, calculator, and then I could go .next sibling, and I could get it that way. So I'm saving myself a little bit of work here by doing this. But what I don't want to see is stuff like this. If you're going div ID equals 7, okay, that's not going to be pretty, right? Because you're going to have all these IDs, and then you're going to have code that goes and grabs them individually. I mean, if you're going to attach a separate event handler for the 7 div and the 9 div and the 8 div, that's not going to go very well. So let's look at how we can handle this. So we've got our ID for keys right here. So now I can basically go and add my click handler for all of the keys. So let's just fire up my HTML, my preview. All right, so here's my calculator. And of course, right now, if there's nothing hooked up, and if I hit F12, so far I haven't added any compile errors as well. Okay. So basically, I'm going to set up my window.onload. All right, and inside here, this is where I want to set up my my key press listener. Okay. So for my key press listener, I'm going to go var. I'll just say buttons equals. Now, of course, I need the $sign, my $sign function, which I haven't added yet, so I'll set that up. So var $sign equals function ID. And document.get element by IDs. All right, so I've got my $sign function. And so basically buttons is going to be $sign, and the HTML is keys. Okay, and that essentially is going to get me this element here, but then I need to get all the children element. So basically all you need to do here is just look up what the document object model property is that returns all of an array essentially of all of the children elements of an element. So in that case, that's going to be .child nodes. Okay. And now that I have these child nodes, I can basically loop through them. So for let I okay, so I'm going to loop through all the buttons, and I'm going to basically say buttons dot on click equals, and now I have to attach my event listener. So let's see here. So basically now we're getting into the point where we're going to go ahead and start adding some functions. So I don't want to get too far into this because we should really talk about, well, what functions do we need to basically finish the project. But in this case, the function that I'm going to use is going to be handle input. So I'll say var handle input equals function, and I can now go ahead and attach this to handle input. Okay. Now, just so we can verify that when we're hitting the buttons that we're actually going to see input, what I can do next is basically just do some console logging. So console.log, all right? And we have a special variable whenever we have a event call in our JavaScript, and that's the this parameter. So this is going to refer to whatever button, or in this case, whatever div or element the person performed the click on. So I can go this, and I think it's going to be first child dot node value. Okay. So when I look at my HTML, I can see that I'm getting each of the children as a span, and there's a text element which is a child. So I'm saying dot first child, and then node value gets the actual value of text. So essentially right now, if I were to run this, and we will now, I should, as I click each button, I should see whatever text represents that button displayed in the console. All right, so here we go. There we go. So we can see it right there. I go 6, I go 5, I go 7, okay, plus multiplication equals. Now, of course, if I hit clear, I'm not going to get anything, and that's just because the clear button is not a child of the keys element. So we'll have to add a separate callback to handle its click event. All right. Okay. So let's switch back now, and we'll talk a little bit about the different functions that we're going to need to complete the project. Okay, so just to quickly review, we've gone and we've added in our global variables. So formula elements, this is going to contain an array of string, which is going to contain addition and subtraction operations. The original formula elements will contain the addition and subtraction as well as multiplication and division. So original is pretty much what the user enters. As they go, if they enter in a multiplication or division, we solve it on the spot, and we keep the updated results in formula elements. This way, when the person hits the equals button, all we have to do is pass in an array that has plus and minus operations, and a function can quickly determine the result. Now, the other variable we use is current number, which is a string variable, which is going to contain whatever presses the person has made to build up a number. So if they hit 239, it's going to have that string 239. All right. So let's move on now and talk about what functions we're going to add to our project. So I'm just going to erase this. Okay, So basically, we're going to need several input handling functions, all right? When we look at the calculator, we know that there's several buttons, and each of these buttons you could pretty much put into a different category. So for example, if the person presses one of the numbers, we're going to need a function that's going to handle that. So one function I'm going to use is going to be called handle number press. Another function, another situation we'll have is the person's going to be hitting operators. So they'll hit the plus, the minus, the division, the multiplication buttons. So in that case, we need another function, I think, to handle that. So I'm going to go with handle operator press. All right. Okay, and then if you're thinking about all the buttons on there, there's a couple that we haven't covered yet. So if the person hits the equals button, then we need to perform an evaluation. So as you would imagine, we need a function. I'm going to call it handle eval press. All right, and the last one is if the person hits the clear button. So for that, we're going to need handle clear press. Okay, so these four functions here are basically related to our input handling. Okay, so in addition to those, we're also going to need some functions related to the display. So basically, on the calculator, there's an area where as the person's typing, we're going to show what the formula that they've entered so far is. And when they hit the equal sign, we're going to show what the end result is. So it's probably best that we have a function where we can pass a string to that function, and then whatever we pass to it, that will be displayed on the calculator. So I'm going to call that function show screen output. Okay, so we've got show screen output. And the other function that's related to that one that I think we will need is we'll need a function that's going to build up the string that we want to display to the user. So as the user's entering in numbers and operators, say they go 5 minus 7 times 3 divided by 2, okay? As they're doing that, we're storing all of those numbers and operators in our original formula elements array. So we need a function that's going to loop through that array and build up the string that we can display in the calculator. So I'm going to call this getDisplayString. Okay. All right. And in terms, so we've pretty much gone through, we've got our input handlers and we've got our display functions here. So really the only thing that we still need is going to be to add in our calculation, the functions that are actually going to do the work of handling the calculation. So for that, I have two functions. Now the first one is very, very simple. This one, the purpose of it is just to take the formula elements array. So this is the array that only has addition and subtraction. It's going to loop through it, and with that array, it's going to calculate the answer, okay? So this function, I'm going to call it calculate answer, okay? All right. And so pretty much, okay, there's only one more left, and this is probably the one sort of tricky function to write. And basically what this function does is it's going to handle the situation where someone has pressed an operator, okay, And we now know that the person is done entering the previous number. And what we want to check is we want to look and see if the operator before was multiplication or division. And if it is, we need to solve that operation and store the result in our formula elements array. So I'm going to call this function evaluate last expression. So let's write it over here. Okay. So essentially here I've got 1, 2, 4, 6, I've got 8 functions, all right? And if I were to go and complete this problem and fill all this in, I'm looking at maybe 100 to 120 lines of code to solve the calculator problem. So pretty much what I'm emphasizing is just the fact that you have a problem like this, you want to break it down into what your algorithm, okay, how you're going to solve it. You want to talk about what your global variables are, and then you want to write out what functions you're going to use to go through and solve your problem, all before you actually sit down and start trying to code it. Okay, let's go through and now stub out these functions. I mean, we don't have to put in functionality yet, but it's a good idea. We know that these are the functions we're going to go with. We can put them into our code, leave them empty for now if we want, and then we can come back later and add in the functionality as we go. Okay. Now I didn't include the handle input function. What I plan for this function is basically whatever key they press, I'm then going to determine inside this one whether or not it's a number key, an operator, or the equals button, or I could even do the clear button as well. And then from there, I'll call the appropriate function. All right, so I've got var handle number press, var handle operator press, handle eval press, and handle clear press. Okay. So we can now modify the handle input function so at least it calls the correct one. All right. So I can say var input equals this dot first child dot node value. Okay. And now I can say if input equals so times, or input equals plus, or input equals minus, or input equals. Now, this division one, the symbol for that, it's not on the keyboard, so I have no idea how to get this symbol other than just copy it right here. Okay, I spent a few minutes trying to look it up, and I just said, you know what? I think I'll just copy this symbol. So there we go. Okay. So I copied that, and in this situation, I want to call handle operator press, and I probably want to pass one parameter, which is going to be the input, the actual operator. So I'm going to modify this function so it gets one parameter when it's called. Okay. So else if input equals, and in this case the equals sign. If that's the case, then I want to say handle eval press. I don't need to pass any parameters there because there's only one possible operation. And then the last case would be else handle number press. Okay. Right, so I've pretty much got all that stuff set up. Let's go now and we'll add in a few more. Oh, and actually, sorry, for my number press, I'm going to want to specify what number it is. So I'm going to pass input, and for number press, okay, number entered will be what I'll call the parameter. All right, so I've got my input handler variables specified. And next up, I want to do my display functions, so that I can basically update the display on my calculator. I can print whatever I want, and also so that I can grab the display string. So in other words, after they've entered in a formula, right, it's being stored in an array. I want to convert that into a string format, and then that way I can pass that to the screen. So I'll add in these functions now. So var show screen output display text, and var get display string. Okay. So show screen output, I'm passing in a string variable, which is going to be the text I want to display. So at this point, I could probably fill these two functions out actually, and one of the nice things about using functions like this is I don't have to have the entire calculator done. I can write a function and then test it out and see if I'm on the right track. So for show screen output, I can fill in this function and set it up. And then, for example, I could, in my window on load, I could just say show screen output, hello, okay? And that way I know if it prints it, it's working properly. So for show screen output, let's just take a look at the HTML. So I have a div element called screen, okay? And there's no text in between this screen element. So basically what I need to do is I'm going to grab the div element. So I'm going to grab it by ID. And then I'm going to have to add a text element as a child. And that text element will contain whatever I pass in. So let's go up here and we'll take a look at this function. So I'm going to use the $. So var screen equals $, screen. Okay, so that's going to get the actual element, and from there I'm going to need to check to see if basically if a child exists. So there's sort of two situations that can happen here. Right now, this div element, it doesn't have any text. Okay, and I'm guessing that the reason is because if you add any text there, then it's going to display on the calculator. So for example, if I put 0 there and I were to save that and reload my calculator, now I can see the actual text, the 0 there. But in this case, we don't have anything. We're not going to start with a 0. So that means there's no child. So basically I have to check to see if there's a child, and if there isn't, I'm going to add it. So I'm going to do basically an if statement. So if screen dot first child equals null. In this case, I'm going to add a child with the text I want. But if there is already text there, then I can go screen dot first child dot node value equals display text. I can just set the text right away. So in this case, I'm going to create a variable for my text node that I'm going to attach, and I'm just looking here, looking up the name of the function for attaching an element. Okay, so I need to, and you can just easily look this up. This is just a case of just Googling JavaScript add text element, or add text element to another element as a child. And this is, you'll find a solution similar to this. So basically I'm going to say let text node equal document.create text node, and I'm going to pass in display text as my parameter, and then I'm going to go screen.add append child text node. Okay, there we go. So if I were to now reload this, assuming there's no errors, it looks like I do have one error here, so let's fix that. So I go to line 34, and okay, so I just haven't declared my function properly. So this just has to be equals function. You guys are probably all screaming at me as I was typing this in. Okay. All right, there we go. And last one. All right. Okay, so let's try this again. All right, I don't have any errors. I do. Okay, line 51. Show screen, okay. Oh yeah, sorry. Okay, equals function. Okay, let's try it now. All right, this time it's gonna work. No. Screen.append child. Okay, append child, I just didn't spell it right, I think. There we go, there we go. Okay, this is gonna work. Yes. Okay, and there we go. What we can see, it's the display function is working because we're seeing it says hello, essentially, okay? And we can do the same thing. I mean, the get display string, that's gonna be a really simple function as well, okay? So basically all I have to do is I'm gonna loop through my array of original formula elements, and then I'm going to basically build up a string as I go, basically concatenating each of the individual array elements to that string. And then based off of that, I can even call the show screen output if I want. So that's a really simple function as well that I can do. Okay, so I'm gonna stop here for today. The big thing I'm trying to emphasize is just the amount of planning you want to do before you jump into trying to write code and solve a problem. So essentially, anytime I've given a problem and I gotta solve it, the last thing I'm gonna do is sit down and start coding right away. Okay, if you do that, you're gonna end up with really bad results. So the idea is you wanna basically think about, okay, what is my main algorithm? How is this gonna work? What are my global variables? What are my functions that I'm going to use? Write them down and review them, have someone look at them, and then once you're confident, then you can get into actually solving the problem. Okay, so I'll stop here. We'll talk more about the project though, in my coming videos, and I'll try to walk you guys through some more of the steps. But I basically if you guys have any questions at this point, let's have you respond. You can email me, as I said, or message me on D2L. And I'd like to hear back, just what do you think of this algorithm? Did you guys understand kind of when I walked through at the start of the video, explaining how as the person's entering in their input, that you solve the multiplication and division right away? Does that seem like something that makes sense to you guys, I guess, is what I want to know. Okay, so let's move on. So what I want to do, the other part of class I was thinking I would do is to work on the current lab, just to do one of the exercises. So I've got lab 6 here, and we've got the short exercises. So I'm going to download this. And for short 6.1. So for this exercise, we're gonna upgrade a version of the miles per gallon application. Let's see if I can zoom. Okay, that's a little bit better. So basically, right now, if we open this up and run it, okay, the errors that are going to pop up, they're going to pop up in inside alerts. So essentially what this is asking us to do is to just, instead of using an alert, we're going to modify the document object model to place the error messages basically in div elements or some sort of text element that is to the right of the text boxes. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'll download the zip file here. Oh, no, that's the wrong one. Okay, I gotta get this is short exercises. Yeah. So let's just take a quick look as well at our JavaScript for this. Okay, so we have our window on load, and basically when we click the calculate button, that's going to then basically process, go through here. This does all the work for us, our process entries. And then if we hit clear, that's going to call the clear entries, which is going to basically set the text boxes to have empty strings and clear them out. And then we also have, if we double click on the miles text box, it looks like it clears them as well. Okay, so the other key thing, we have some error checking. So you'll notice that if they don't enter anything, into miles, or if they enter something that's negative, or not a number, that we're going to pop up an alert, all right? And we're going to set is valid variable to false. And we do the same thing for gallons. And then only if it's valid do we actually set the value, okay? We actually set the value in the last text box. Okay, so really all we got to do here is just modify this script. So instead of popping up an alert, it's going to use the document object model to basically set error messages in the DOM. Okay, so looking at my index.html, right now I don't see any place set aside for these error messages. So we're gonna have to add this as well to our HTML document. All right, so let me try, I'm gonna just fire up the HTML document here so we can take a quick look. Okay. So first thing let's do is let's add a text element basically to the right of each of these text boxes that we can then manipulate by adding in a error message. Okay, so we have a label for miles, we have an input type for miles, and let's then go and we'll add a span element. We'll call it, okay, so we'll have a span element, we'll just put in an asterisk. Okay, and there we go, we can see we have the error showing up there. So I'll just copy this and I'll paste it into the other places. Okay, so I guess that should be good. All right. So now we just essentially have to modify our document object model to change those asterisks to the appropriate error message, essentially. All right, so if I go and look at my miles per gallon JavaScript here, so I'll just comment out this first alert. And in this case, instead of using that alert, I'm now going to just do some really simple object traversal. So basically, I'm going to go $, and I probably want to get miles here, I'm guessing. Okay. And now we need to decide how we're going to, move from element to element to get to that span. So let's look back at the HTML. So if I'm looking at miles, that's a label here. Okay. And if I were to go to the next sibling, I would go to the text box, or sorry, no, the text box is right here. Okay, that's the ID of miles. So all I have to do is call next element sibling, and I'm going to move from miles over to the span, and then I can set whatever error message I want. Okay, so I'm going to go miles.next element sibling, and then I'm going to say, so obviously now I'm at the span, so now I have to get the child, so next child. Oh, first child. Okay, so first child dot node value equals, and now I can paste in this alert message. All right, there we go. Okay, so let's test this out. So I'll just go ahead and I'll say calculate. And I've got my message here. So miles must be numeric and greater than 0. Now, of course, if I hit the clear entries, I also want to clear that error message and set it back to the original. All right. Okay, so let's do the same thing here for gallons. So I'll comment out this alert, and I'll go $, gallons, next element sibling dot first child dot node value equals, and I'm going to say gallons must be numeric or greater than 0. Okay. All right. So I think that's pretty much good. But I also need to reset these error messages. So if the person enters in something that is legit, then I want to reset this. So I'm gonna have to use an else. Well, that's just how I'm gonna do it. So I'm gonna go else, and in this case, I'm going to change this to, instead of the error message, I'm gonna change it to equals empty string, and I'll do this for this one as well. Okay, there we go. Okay, and the clear entries, I'm also going to need to add the reset code for that as well. So I'll copy and paste these, and I'll place them inside my clear entries. All right. Okay, so I think that should pretty much be it. So if I come in here and I don't enter anything, and basically I receive my error messages. Now if I actually go and enter something, and I click calculate miles per gallon, the error messages go away. And if I clear entries, they go away as well. Actually, the one mistake I made, I just realized, is I don't want to set them to the empty string. I want to set them to the asterisks, because that also indicates that that's what is required. Okay, so I'm going to set that to the asterisk as well. Okay, so once again, let's try this out. Okay, so I got my error message. If I clear entries, it goes back. I hit calculate, looks good. If I make a mistake with one, okay, it gives me my error message, and then when I fix it, it removes that. Okay. All right. So I think I'm going to stop here for today. So coming up this week, basically, I want you guys to finish up working on Lab 6, right? So this is one of the questions from Lab 6. I believe also last class we had last Monday, I did one of the questions as well. Let me just take a quick look here. So for Lab 6, so we have extra 6.1, which we just did. There's 6.2, and then we have extra exercises 6.1. So last Monday, I did extra exercises 6.1 in class. I've now done 6.1. So what I'd like you guys to do is focus on finishing this lab for today. Next time I am scheduled to teach you guys is going to be, I think it's Thursday. Anyway, next time I have you guys, my plan is to talk a little bit more about the project, okay? Go over the algorithm again, and maybe do a few examples on the whiteboard of okay, if the user presses this on the calculator, this is what would be stored in the two arrays, the formula elements and original formula elements arrays. In addition to that, I'm probably going to move on to some material from Chapter 7. There's some really cool stuff in Chapter 7 where we can use a timer object to basically show things and then transition things on our websites. So we can do things like create simple slideshows and different special effects like fading in an image and fading it out over a period of time. So I'm gonna, just get started and show you guys a few things about that. And then, as I said, work on the calculator project as well. So please let me know what you guys think of this video format. I know some of the other teachers are using some other technology. So if you guys have a suggestion, you'd like me to try to deliver the content slightly differently, or a different format, let me know, because I'd be happy to try out some different strategies. Okay, so anyway, good luck working on this, and I'll be in touch.